Human history isn't a straight line. We like to think we climbed step by step, from primitive huts to gleaming cities, but hidden beneath the earth are worlds that tell a different story. Civilizations that rose long before they should have, built wonders they shouldn't have been able to build, and vanished without explanation. These are 10 lost civilizations that shouldn't have existed, the forgotten empires that defy logic, science, and time itself. Before we begin, if you find stories like this fascinating, hit like, subscribe to Should I Go, and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next deep dive into the world's strangest and most mysterious places. All right, let's start with the oldest mystery of them all, and end with one that rewrote everything we thought we knew. Hidden in Cambodia's northern jungle lies Angkor, the lost heart of the Khmer Empire, a civilization so vast it once covered more land than modern Los Angeles. Between the 9th and 15th centuries, it became the center of Southeast Asia's most advanced urban world palaces, temples, and a labyrinth of canals that turned monsoon floods into prosperity. The Temple of Angkor Wat remains the masterpiece, 5 towers symbolizing the peaks of Mount Meru, the home of the gods. Carvings spiral across its galleries like an ancient comic book, celestial dancers, epic battles, and scenes of daily life frozen in stone. But Angkor Wat was only one part of a gigantic spiritual landscape stretching across 400 square kilometers. The true genius of the Khmer wasn't just artistic, it was engineering. They built vast barrays, reservoirs the size of lakes, linked by channels that controlled rainfall and irrigation with surgical precision. Centuries before Europe's sewers or aqueducts reached this scale, Angkor had mastered hydraulic city design. Then suddenly, the miracle faltered. A cascade of droughts, followed by flash floods, shattered the delicate system. Trade shifted, wars erupted, and within decades the jungle reclaimed the stone. For centuries, travelers spoke of a lost city of towers swallowed by vines, until French explorers stumbled upon it in the 19th century. Today, airborne LiDAR has peeled back the canopy to reveal an enormous urban grid. Neighborhoods, roads, even suburbs hiding beneath roots. We now know Angkor wasn't a cluster of temples. It was the world's first true megacity, a civilization that rose from the jungle, and then, impossibly, returned to it. 2,000 years before classical Greece, the island of Crete pulsed with color, trade, and music. Here lived the Minoans, Europe's first high civilization, people who built multi-story palaces with light wells, plumbing, and paved courtyards when most of the continent still lived in huts. The Palace of Knossos dazzled early excavators, twisting corridors, storage magazines full of grain and oil, frescoes of acrobats vaulting over bulls. It's easy to see why legend turned this place into the labyrinth of the Minotaur. But behind the myth stood a peaceful, seagoing society led largely by merchants and priestesses rather than warrior kings. Their art celebrates harmony, bright seas, flowers, and ritual dances, suggesting a world that valued beauty over conquest. They traded tin, wine, and olive oil across the Aegean, their ships reaching Egypt and the Levant. And yet their language, Linear A, remains unreadable, a civilization speaking to us only through pictures. Then, disaster struck. Around 1450 BCE, the volcano Thera erupted with the force of hundreds of atomic bombs. Tsunamis and ash crippled trade, palaces burned, and invaders from the mainland moved in. Within a generation, the Minoans vanished. Recent underwater surveys have found sunken piers and warehouses off Crete's north coast, the drowned remains of their ports. Amphorae still lie scattered across the seabed, testimony to a vanished maritime empire. The Minoans remind us that Europe's story of civilization didn't begin in Athens. It began here, on an island of light, long before history remembered their name. In the swampy lowlands of southern Mexico, long before the Maya or the Aztecs, rose a people we call the Olmec. Between 1500 and 400 BCE, they carved civilization out of rainforest, plazas, pyramids, and giant stone heads whose faces still gaze through the mist. Each head weighs up to 40 tons and carries a unique expression, as if sculptors captured real leaders in basalt. How they quarried and transported those blocks without wheels or metal tools remains one of archaeology's quiet miracles. The Olmec world revolved around rivers and ritual. They built ceremonial centers aligned to celestial events and may have created the first sacred ball game of the Americas. Jade figurines, jaguar masks, and serpent motifs suggest a mythology later echoed by every culture that followed. In many ways, they were the blueprint for Mesoamerican civilization itself. Then their cities fell silent. By 400 BCE, their capitals were abandoned, their language lost. Yet new technology is uncovering what the jungle concealed. LiDAR surveys now show hundreds of platforms and causeways spreading across the floodplains, evidence of a networked culture far larger than anyone guessed. San Lorenzo and La Venta weren't isolated capitals, they were hubs in a connected world. The Olmec appeared suddenly, achieved greatness, and disappeared just as fast, leaving only stone faces staring into eternity. They shouldn't have existed in their time, but they did, and every empire that rose after them borrowed their shadow. High in the Horn of Africa, the kingdom of Aksum once stood among the giants of the ancient world. They minted coins, traded with Rome and India, and raised monuments taller than 10-story buildings, all more than 1,500 years ago. It was a crossroads of continents, Africa's forgotten empire. But much of Aksum is still underground. Recent drone mapping and radar scans show entire neighborhoods buried beneath modern towns, waiting to be uncovered. For centuries, people thought Africa's early history began in Egypt. Aksum reminds us it began everywhere. High above the desert floor of the American Southwest, entire cities cling to the cliffs like nests of stone. These are the homes of the ancestral Puebloans, the ancestors of today's Hopi, Zuni, and Pueblo peoples, who between 900 and 1300 CE transformed the canyons of Colorado, Utah, Arizona, and New Mexico into vertical worlds. At Mesa Verde, they carved apartments, storage rooms, and ceremonial kivas directly into the rock. Some structures rose 4 stories high, tucked beneath natural overhangs that shielded them from rain and searing sun. From a distance, they seem impossible. Stone honeycombs balanced on sheer canyon walls. How they accomplished this still puzzles archaeologists. They had no metal tools, no pack animals, no wheels. Every sandstone block was shaped by hand and carried up precarious ladders. And yet, their architecture shows astonishing precision. Doorways aligned for cross-ventilation, drainage channels carved to redirect runoff, even plastered walls that glowed with mineral pigments. Excavations reveal that these were not merely homes, but engineered ecosystems. Hidden cisterns collected scarce rainwater. Underground tunnels connected chambers and helped regulate temperature. Their communities adapted perfectly to a brutal climate, recycling every drop of water and every scrap of wood. By the late 1200s, a great drought struck. Rivers dried, crops failed, and the people migrated south and east, forming the pueblos that still thrive today. The cliff dwellings were left behind, silent, intact, hauntingly beautiful. Standing there at dusk, you can almost hear children's laughter echo off the stone. The ancestral Puebloans built sanctuaries that defied gravity, time, and logic. They shouldn't have been possible, and yet they were. In the remote Pacific, off the island of Pohnpei, lies one of the strangest cities ever built, Nan Madol. From the air, it looks like a shattered checkerboard of stone, a maze of rectangular islets separated by canals. Up close, its walls rise straight from the water. Massive basalt columns, each weighing several tons, stacked like logs into fortresses. No one knows why its builders chose to construct on coral reefs, or how they moved such immense stones across miles of open sea without metal or wheels. Legend says sorcerers used flying dragons of light. Archaeologists suggest bamboo rafts and clever tide work. Either way, the feat is mind-bending. Nan Madol was more than architecture. It was ritual made solid. The city's 92 artificial islets formed palaces, temples, tombs, and homes for a priest-king dynasty known as the Saudalur, who ruled between 1100 and 1600 CE. They controlled trade and religion across the island chain, turning this lagoon into the spiritual and political capital of Micronesia. Beneath the surface, sonar mapping has revealed sunken causeways and chambers, corridors that once connected the islets before sea levels rose. Divers have found walls continuing deep below modern waterlines, suggesting the complex was even larger than what remains visible today. Local oral traditions tell of tyranny, rebellion, and the fall of the Saudalor, after which the ocean reclaimed the city. Today, the ruins lie half-drowned, half-haunted, stone corridors where fish swim through doorways once meant for kings. Scholars call Nan Madol the Venice of the Pacific, but that hardly captures its mystery. Its builders mastered tides, buoyancy, and balance in ways we barely understand. Centuries before Venice ever existed, a civilization in the middle of the ocean built a floating capital of stone and then let it sink back into legend. Along the banks of the Indus River once stood a civilization as mighty as Egypt or Mesopotamia, yet unlike any other. The Indus Valley civilization had cities with plumbing, drainage, and grid systems more precise than many today. But no palaces, no temples, no kings. Who led them? No one knows, because their writing remains undeciphered. Recent satellite images show thousands of undiscovered settlements buried in the floodplains, evidence of an enormous network of interconnected cities. They built a world of order and balance, then disappeared without a trace. For years we thought Göbekli Tepe stood alone, a singular miracle of prehistory. But in recent decades, the ground around southeastern Turkey has started whispering a far bigger story. Beneath the rolling hills of Şanlıurfa lies a constellation of sites known collectively as the Taş Tepeler, or Stone Hills. Across an area roughly the size of Manhattan, archaeologists have uncovered more than a dozen monumental complexes: Karahan Tepe, Mendik Tepe, Sayburç, Sefertep, and others still unnamed. Each shares Göbekli's signature: towering T-shaped pillars, intricate carvings of wild animals, and ritual chambers sunken into bedrock. But each adds its own twist. At Karahan Tepe, newly opened to visitors in 2025, excavators revealed a chamber ringed by human-sized pillars surrounding a central stone phallus. Nearby, reliefs of serpents, foxes, and leopards coil across walls that once glowed with torchlight. At Mendik Tepe, teams have uncovered sculpted human faces and circular enclosures that may predate Göbekli Tepe itself, pushing the dawn of monumental building back hundreds of years earlier than anyone believed. The people who built these sanctuaries were supposed to be nomadic hunter-gatherers, yet here they were quarrying limestone, organizing labor forces, and aligning architecture to the heavens. They hauled pillars weighing up to 10 tons across the plateau, carved symbols of life and death, and gathered for ceremonies that may have bound scattered tribes into the first shared belief system on Earth. Geophysical surveys suggest many more sites still slumber beneath the hills, their shapes hinted at by magnetic shadows. Taken together, Taş Tepeler isn't just a collection of temples, it's an entire networked culture, the first flicker of organized society. Long before the wheel, before pottery, before writing, humans here had already learned to dream in stone. The more we dig, the clearer the pattern becomes. Göbekli Tepe was not the beginning. Deep in Egypt's western desert, hundreds of kilometers south of the Nile, a dry basin called Nabta Playa hides one of humanity's earliest observatories. 7,000 years ago, when the Sahara was still dotted with lakes and grasslands, nomadic cattle herders gathered here and built something extraordinary. They arranged standing stones into circles and radial lines that aligned precisely with the rising and setting of the summer solstice sun. Some of these alignments also point to bright stars, such as Orion and Sirius. This was 5 millennia before Stonehenge, in a region we once thought empty of civilization. Excavations show the builders were herders who buried cattle in ritual pits, suggesting a cosmic link between the heavens and the herd, life, death, and renewal mirrored in the stars. What's astonishing is the planning. The stones are set within a larger geometric grid spanning several kilometers, implying an understanding of astronomy, geometry, and the calendar far beyond their supposed level of technology. Modern ground-penetrating radar has uncovered subsurface chambers and buried alignments leading away from the main circle. Some archaeologists believe these were processional routes or ceremonial causeways used during solstice gatherings. Others see evidence of a water cult, a society watching the sky to predict rains in an environment growing ever drier. When the climate shifted around 5000 BCE, Nabta Playa's lakes evaporated. The people moved toward the Nile, carrying their sky-watching traditions with them. Many scholars now think the idea of the Egyptian calendar and solar worship was born right here in the desert, long before pharaohs ever wore crowns. So when we look at the pyramids or the alignment of temples along the Nile, we may be seeing echoes of Nabta Playa, the prehistoric classroom where humanity first learned to measure the universe. Across continents and millennia, the same heartbeat echoes. From desert to jungle, from mountain to sea, people built the impossible, then vanished. They mastered water, stone, and star alike, leaving only fragments for us to rediscover. They built big, they dreamed bigger, and somewhere beneath the dust, their stories still wait to be heard. Which brings us to the one that rewrote everything. 12,000 years ago, long before writing, metal, or the wheel, people gathered on a barren ridge in southeastern Turkey and built something the world had never seen. Göbekli Tepe, a ring of towering limestone pillars arranged in perfect circles, carved with animals, symbols, and spirits that seemed to step straight out of the Ice Age imagination. Each pillar weighs up to 10 tons, yet they were quarried, hauled, and raised by hand. The site predates Stonehenge by 6,000 years, and the pyramids by 7. Nothing about it fits the timeline we were taught. Hunter-gatherers weren't supposed to build monuments, certainly not ones requiring engineering, astronomy, and social organization. For decades, Göbekli Tepe was thought to be a purely ceremonial site, a place where scattered tribes met to honor the gods before returning to their nomadic lives. But recent excavations have rewritten that story. Archaeologists have uncovered grinding stones, storage pits, hearths, and water channels, proof that people lived and worked here for generations. This wasn't a temporary camp. It was a settled community, perhaps the world's first. The latest discoveries, announced in 2025, add new chapters to its mystery. Near the main circular enclosures, excavators revealed a life-sized human figure, carved in relief, the first of its kind at the site. The torso and head are intact, arms crossed over the chest as if guarding secrets older than memory. Elsewhere, researchers studying the carvings on Pillar 43, the so-called vulture stone, believe they encode the world's earliest lunisolar calendar, tracking both the solar year and lunar months with astonishing precision. Some even suggest the symbols record a comet impact around 10,850 BCE, an event that may have changed global climate and inspired legends of flood and fire. Geophysical scans now indicate dozens of additional enclosures buried beneath the hill. Only about 10% of the site has been excavated, meaning the world's oldest known temple complex is still mostly hidden underground. And when viewed from above, the alignments of its circles seem to map not chaos, but cosmic order. Pillars positioned to mirror the stars overhead, perhaps uniting heaven and earth in stone. Standing amid those pillars today, it's hard not to feel the weight of time. Every carving, every groove, every animal frozen in relief whispers that humanity's genius didn't begin with cities, it began with imagination. Göbekli Tepe doesn't just rewrite archaeology, it rewrites us, proving that even 12 millennia ago, our ancestors could dream, organize, and build monuments meant to outlast the ages. It is not simply the first temple on Earth, it is the moment consciousness turned into civilization. Göbekli Tepe doesn't just change history, it changes the story of humanity itself. So what do these lost civilizations teach us? That progress isn't a straight line. That knowledge rises, falls, and sometimes disappears for millennia. And that maybe the world we think we know is only the surface. If you enjoyed exploring with us, hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell. It really helps us bring you more wild adventures from around the world. And next time, we'll explore 7 islands abandoned by time, places the world forgot, but history never did. Until then, keep wondering what still lies buried beneath our feet. The world is filled with amazing stories,